I've paid thousands of dollars in courses to learn what you're basically teaching on your podcast for free. What you're putting out there is so valuable. So, I just really want to acknowledge you, and I definitely send everyone to your podcast.
You were virtually one of the first mentors that I looked up to and started following. You're always one step ahead of the game. So I just wanted to give you kudos and props for that, because lots of people are watching, lots of people are learning from it.
Tucker and the whole TTM crew, Dan and Chris, thanks so much for your support. I love what you guys do, and a huge, huge fan. Having this support's huge. So I'm grateful for that.
What's up, everybody out there in listener land? This is episode 245 of the Real Dealz podcast, and I am your host, as always, Tucker Merrihew. Hey, I want to thank you guys for joining me this week. We probably have a lot of new listeners. We've had a lot of outside guests on the show, and with that comes new listeners to the show. So I want to welcome you guys that are new, and for those of you guys that have been with me since day one, I appreciate you continuing to listen to the show. Hey, last week, it was a hot show. We had my man Thatch on, and we got into some deep conversation about, his strategies moving forward, my strategies moving forward in this new market that we're kind of embarking on as we head into the end of 2018. Well, we're in the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. And we go deep, and we talk about, what it is that we're going to do, mainly him, but I chipped in too, in order to succeed moving forward in a time where there's a little bit of uncertainty in terms of where the market is headed. And so it was a great show. He brings a ton of energy, and he's just a really smart dude. So go check that episode out if you have not already. What that episode did, though, for me, is it really got me thinking. And it made me think, what could I record this week to put out on the heels of such a great show? And I thought to myself, you know what? I want to do a show that is basically a 2018 wrap-up, reflections, we'll call it, of what I've learned, not only this year, but just overall. I've learned a lot since I started podcasting here. We're going on 5 years. It'll be 5 years coming up in 2019 when we started this show. We started it, I believe, at the beginning of 2014, and we'll be at the beginning of 2019, so about 5 years, which is crazy if I did my math right. Either way, long time. And I've learned a lot. I've met a ton of great people, and it's just been an amazing journey for me to go from, basically picking up a microphone and going, can I do this? To here we are 245 episodes later. We have, robust mastermind group. We've got a really awesome high-end coaching program. And I've met tons and tons of you guys from all across the country, had lots and lots of amazing conversation, and it's just been a tremendous ride for me. But what I wanted to do was do kind of a reflection show. A show about all the biggest things that I've learned, and not necessarily just, from having this show, but, mistakes that I've made along the way in my own personal business, growth that I've made, things that I've learned, and of course, things that I've picked up along the way from meeting many of you and talking with many of our guests who are also very successful people, and also plenty of those that are in our mastermind group. So I figured this would be a good show for you guys to take away the things that I've learned as well over the course of time that I've had this podcast out there in the world. And hopefully you guys get a lot of value out of it. So that's going to be this week's show, and I know there'll be some really solid golden nuggets, and hopefully some tips that prevent you guys from doing some of the bonehead stuff that I've done over the years that maybe not bonehead, but we'll call it missteps. Steps that would have been more profitable had I taken a slightly different step than the step that I took. And it's always good to learn from other people's missteps so that you don't take those missteps yourself. So that's this week's show. Now, before I get into that, couple big announcements. Number one, and I know this is echoing a little bit, but I'm reminiscing here since this is a wrap-up and a reflection show. I'm sitting in one of our houses that sells tomorrow. We've got a big December, which I'll talk about here in a couple minutes, but it's a multi-million-dollar new construction home that closes up tomorrow, and it ended up being about a 14-day close to some buyers, and so we're getting this thing off the books, and we're closing out a big development. So I figured this would be as good a place as any to record the show. So if you hear it echo a little bit, that's why. Now, what I got as far as housekeeping items and a very big announcement. I made a little teaser announcement last week. I told you guys what was going on with our Driving for Dollars app. Well, here's The Real Dealz skinny on that. We have officially signed the contract with our new data provider. We have tested the API. It is lightning fast, and it looks like we are good to go. So we are in implementation mode on the back end in terms of linking up the app with the new API and getting all of the data that can pull kind of organized for you guys so that you can use it. But basically, here's what it is. We've created the app originally so that you could build lists, driving for dollars lists easily. You could use it to essentially pull people's phone numbers as well, get mortgage information. You could cold call straight from the app. Hell, Corey Thompson was on the show not too long ago, and he said that he was in a small little nowhere town in Texas, and he used the app, pulled up a phone number, and called somebody right there on the spot. When I was speaking up in Seattle not too long ago, somebody came up to me and told me the same thing. So that was the function, right? It provided you one way to get a hold of somebody as well as their mailing address so that you could market to them via mail. Well, now we've got a new evolution of the app, and the new evolution is basically skip tracing in the palm of your hand. So it gives you everything that it gave you before, plus a whole lot more. It gives you every known phone number, every known email address, every known address, and all kinds of additional information that helps qualify both the property and the individual for multiple levels of potential motivation or just leverage that you can use as a marketer to kind of figure out where the good leads are and whether or not they're worth spending more money to try and get in front of them. So, and then of course, obviously you can take the email address, you can run all kinds of Facebook ads, email marketing, just tons of stuff. So we basically have created something that now serves two functions, right? For those of you guys that have a TLO account or a LexisNexis account, you've got pretty high minimums in order to maintain those accounts. You don't need it anymore. You've got the skip tracing ability in the palm of your hand as well as the list building ability with the D4D app. And so that's the cool, groundbreaking, totally business changing alterations that we're making to the app, and it'll be up and done by the end of the month. Now, the other thing that we're offering is for those people that are app users, we will also be able to run batch skip tracing for you for other lists or past lists that you have at the cheapest price in the market, because we want to take care of all of those people that are our customers. So we're setting up a way for us to run those for you as well with the same data provider, and it's basically verified data. So it's TLO level data, but it's from a separate entity that allows us to tap into their API and use their information for marketing purposes, where TLO doesn't like that so much. So you basically don't need a LexisNexis account, you don't need a TLO account. All you need is a Driving for Dollars app. And of course, it's free to download. It's in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, and you'll still get a 5-property free trial so you can test it out, see how you like it. But it's going to be a tremendous deal, and it's going to serve two functions for people in their business. So it'll allow you to both build lists in even more of a robust way than now, because you'll have even more data points that you can contact them with. But it also becomes a skip trace service, so you can skip trace old mail, you can skip trace random one-off properties. You can use it for anything that you would use TLO or LexisNexis for as well. So we're super stoked about this change, or this enhancement, we'll call it. We also have some user interface enhancements that I've talked about many times that we're putting into place as well. But this is the biggest thing. This is a real game changer for our business, and we're just super excited about it. So keep an eye out for that. End of the month, it's coming up. Now, second announcement is our REI Deal Generator program. We are almost done with our beta round. It's been 6 months. It's crazy to think that, but we've had some awesome students that are a part of this, and we've seen some tremendous journeys along the way. But we are going to be opening up for our second round of students, which will be probably somewhere between 6 and 8 people. We'll see. It just kind of depends on how much time we can pencil in. Myself and Justin are very busy with everything we have going on, but we want to make sure that we not only make the experience amazing for whoever it is that decides to be in round 2, but we improve it from round 1, and we continue to add to the community of people that are a part of this program. So people that were in at the first round aren't going to go away. They're still going to be there, and we're just going to add to this community, and we're going to improve the program even more as we move forward. So if you're interested in that and you want to work side by side with myself and Justin Silverio as we deploy marketing for you, kind of identify your marketing areas, set up and build your company, basically do everything alongside with you, and then help you process and analyze leads, put deals together, do everything it is to kind of get you off the ground. And the analogy I used before is like the kid that you teach to ride the bike and you let go. and then they're just riding on their own. That's what we want to do. So if you're interested in round 2 of this program, it's a 6-month program, please feel free to reach out to us. It will fill up fast. We had a number of people we actually turned away last time that we could have accepted and taken money, but we didn't, because we wanted to make sure that we delivered as much value as possible. So if you're interested, I highly suggest you reach out to us, and Dan will give you all the information that you would need, and we'll put the information in the show notes. Now, as I mentioned before, big news for the end of the year for us. We're finishing strong. We've got 2 closings, one tomorrow. I'm recording this on Thursday, and then 1 week from tomorrow. So we've got about another $2.1 million in sales. Obviously, that's just, price of homes that we're selling. One's a high dollar home, one's an entry level home. But we're closing out the year strong. A couple contracts that we didn't necessarily expect to get in December and have closed before Christmas. It's kind of that weird time of year, but we got it done, and I'm excited about it. And more importantly, we're actually finishing up and closing out one of our biggest development projects to date that we did here in Lake Oswego. And so we're selling our last home out of that development project and washing our hands of it. So we took this one from the very beginning to the very end, and let me tell you, I learned a lot of stuff along the way. It was a highly profitable project for us in the end, but there was also a lot of learning that went on as well. So some of that will be in my reflections portion of this show. But I'm excited the way this year has wrapped up for us. We ended up doing really well, and I'm excited to kind of move into next year and talk about the types of projects that we're going to take on as we move into next year, so that we can remain nimble and able to take advantage of what is probably a continually changing market, but we'll see. So anyway, that's the Cliff Notes version of what's going on with me and TTM. So without further ado, let's get into the rest of the show.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
All right, guys, main topic time. And we'll call this main topic Reflections of 2018 and Beyond. And when I say beyond, I mean beyond in the past. So further back. But I wanted to talk about kind of this year, the biggest thing that kind of really resonated with me over the course of this year. And it's something that none of us are taught. We're not taught this in school, not in high school. We're not taught this in life. It's really a life hack that for whatever reason, it's just not taught. And people, I guess really what it comes down to is in the educational institutions that most of us go to, which is not the self-education, it's just the more traditional routes, there aren't people within those institutions that really understand this. And because they don't understand this, they can't teach this. And because they don't teach it, many of us don't know it. And so it takes a while for us to really absorb how to play this thing called the game of life, because really at the end of the day, it's a game. Our tax code is a game. You know, people can complain about it all they want, but the reality is that the game has the same rules for everybody. It's just a matter of how well you play the game. And so you can complain about it all you want, but since we're all playing by the same rules, It's up to you as to whether or not you want to identify and take advantage of those rules, or whether or not you just want to sit back and complain about it. Me personally, I want to learn as much about the rules as I can and play within them to win. And that's really what my biggest reflection on this year is, because here's the deal. I always talk about the real estate ladder, right? And as many of you guys who listen to the show get into the world of real estate, generally the first thing that you're trying to accomplish is make money, right? You're trying to market for deals, find deals, and make money. And that money is earned income, which is basically income that's taxed at the highest possible rate, depending, of course, on your tax bracket at the end of the year. But ultimately, if you're successful in this business and you're successful finding deals and you're successful converting those deals to dollars, over time, you're going to start making more money. And as you start making more money, you work your way up to eventually the 50% plus tax bracket. And that's where most of the big earners sit in this business. Now, what I've learned is that you start to grow, you earn some income, you reinvest that income, you do some bigger projects. Because of those bigger projects and the more deals that you do, you start making more of that money. And then you go, wow, I made all this money, which is awesome. I did all these deals, which is awesome. It sounds great, looks awesome on the internet. Sounds very impressive when you talk about your resume or you get on a podcast or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you don't do it correctly, all that work, you've got a partner who takes half of it at the end of the year, which is the government, which is the IRS. And that, to me, is it's a really disturbing thing at the end of the day. And I'm all for, paying your part. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an anti, taxes are illegal guy. I get it. The country has to function off dollars for all kinds of social services and infrastructure and things like that. I understand it's a giant business. But at the end of the day, there are rules and ways for us as real estate professionals to really take full advantage of the tax code so that we don't have this partner that takes half our money. So that when we do 100, 200 flips a year, if that's what you want to do, you're not giving away half of all that brain damage that goes into that over the course of the year. And I don't care what anybody says. You can build a business that does massive volume, but you're still managing the machine. And the machine to manage still takes time and brain damage. And so you may not be swinging a hammer. You may not be sealing envelopes. But you know what? You're managing a lot of different personality types. And sometimes that can be even more stressful than anything else. And you're also managing overhead. You're managing capital expenditure. You are absorbing personally the risk of all of the expenditures of the business in hopes that the expenditures are less than the revenue that's generated by them at the end of the day. So you have all these different stresses, right? It just depends, how big your business is. That dictates the types of stresses that you have. But my point is that, we work so hard to build these businesses, and this is what Thatch was talking about last week, is we got to know where in the hell we're going. What are we trying to accomplish, right? And, as I look back, not only on this year, but just years past, and this year was a big one for me because I sold my previous primary residence and I made a lot of money. I made close to the absolute maximum that you can make tax-free after owning a property for 2 years. And I've done that a number of times now, and it's always a constant reminder of, that's like making, if I made $500,000 on the sale of my primary residence this year, that's like making $1 million of earned income because it's tax-free, right? And if I'm making $500K, generally, that's going to put me in the highest tax bracket for sure. I'm going to be paying 50% of my income tax here in Oregon. If I'm making $1 million, I'm definitely paying 50% of my income in taxes when you count federal and state taxes. So that money that I made was tax-free. I would have had to made $1 million or close to it anyway. I didn't quite make $500,000, but close to it. I would have had to make close to $1 million in earned income through my business, through flips, through building, through doing project, brain damage, all that stuff, in order to have made that same amount of money that I made on one transaction, which was my house. Now, you can only do that so many times. So that's obviously a strategy that can be implemented once every couple of years, or depending on whether or not your wife will let you move, right? Joke to joke. It's whether or not you want to move to, because you got to uproot. If you've got family and you've got kids and you've got all those things, it makes moving more difficult. I did it more so before I had a family. I've done it 5 times now, I think, in the last 15 years. So about every 3 years I've moved and done it. And 4 out of the 5 times I made a lot of money. 1 out of the 5 times I made like 15 grand. It was a townhome and I just bought it at the wrong time, sold it at the wrong time. But the other 4 I did really, really well, as in making, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars every time. And so that adds up. But here's the other side of it, right? We can also operate our business, whatever it is that we want it to be. We can make a bunch of money. We can do a ton of deals. We can make a ton of profit. But at the end of the day, if we don't have another part of our business that's in place to offset those profits, we're going to be paying 50% to the government. And so last week's show was a big reminder to me, but this year in general has just been a big reminder that, the rules of engagement for the tax code is this. You want to build a machine that earns income, right? That creates cash flow. But you also want to retain some assets. And when I say retain some assets, I'm not talking about cash accounts or stock accounts. I'm talking about retaining real estate in larger forms. So real estate in the form of larger multifamily, potentially commercial buildings, things that have a large amount of depreciation that can be taken, or accelerated depreciation that can be taken, to apply against your income. And if, like I told you maybe not many episodes back, but a handful of episodes back, there was an individual that was doing his taxes at the same time as mine. He made a $2 million phantom loss on his tax returns. He wasn't going to use all $2 million this year, but that then pushes forward into the future until he uses it all. And he basically pays no taxes. And he was making a shitload of money this past year. And he used that $2 million to offset it. So he basically took all of his earned income and turned it into the same type of income that I made selling my primary residence this past year. And so that's the true power of this business. If you're going to build a machine that does a lot of revenue and makes a lot of money, and even if it's not a lot of money, let's just say it's $250,000 a year, right? Which is still great money, don't get me wrong, but that's very attainable, that's very doable. There's no reason why you shouldn't also then buy assets that allow you to offset that income with phantom losses, we'll call it, on your tax returns, so that you keep as much or all of that money, or as much of that money as you can, or all of that money. It just depends on how big the asset is and how much depreciation you can take, or accelerated depreciation. And then you continue to add to it. And it's a very important concept. It's one that we're not really taught, but at the end of the day, that's how you get filthy, stinking rich. That, or you just invent some sort of technology and you sell it for $1 gazillion, and then you don't care, you can pay as much taxes, and it really doesn't matter. But for those of us normal folks that don't come up with the next Facebook or Snapchat or anything that gets bought for $1 gazillion, we have to grind it out a little more. And when you grind it out and then you're giving half of it away every year, that path to wealth is a lot slower. It just really is. And so anyway, I've been reminded of this year again. I know this concept, but it's kind of beaten me across the face a number of times this year and said, hey, it's time to really understand this, embrace it. And I hope that many of you guys out there in listener land are kind of understanding that and embracing it as well, because it's a great way to offset all of the income that we work so hard for every year to create. And that way we don't have to give half of it away. So that's been a big concept that really has resonated more this year than any years in the past. And it's one that I'm going to take to heart, and I'm going to implement the changes in our business moving forward so that we can continue to keep more of the money, as we move forward and pay less in taxes and just play the game as everybody should play it. Now, the other thing that I've learned this year, and I've learned maybe not necessarily totally this year, but it's been a culmination over the past few years. But as I do more coaching, I've learned something that I think is very important and that all of you guys should take into account. And what that is that you don't all have to build the same type of business. Just because you hear somebody on a podcast says that they do 100 or 200 deals a year or this or that, that doesn't mean that's the type of business that fits you, that suits you, your personality, who you are. There's a million ways to make $1 million, not only in life, but in this business as well. And so you really have to think about, okay, what type of business within the real estate business best suits me? What do I want to do, right? Do I want to build a behemoth company that does 100 deals a year? If you do, good for you. Go for it, knock your socks off, make it happen, go take over the world. But there's only so many personality types like that. There's other people that maybe want to do 3 or 4 deals a year, and they want to make 50 to 80K a deal, right? And so you make, $200,000 to $400,000 a year, and you don't have a ton of stress, you don't have an office, you don't have a lot of overhead, but you make a very, very good living. And if you have some other assets that you keep in terms of rental property to offset a lot of that income, you live a very, very good life. And so, and there's many variations in between those or outside of those as well, but build a business that suits you, not a business that sounds good on social media. So really think about that when you're building your business. Obviously, the core set of skills that you need is deal finding and marketing. But once you have that down, build the business that suits you best and makes you most happy. And that is really an important thing that, I've learned, especially this past year as I've done more coaching, is that not everybody wants the same business at the end of the day. They may think they do, but not everybody does. And so you got to find the business that best fits you. And I think that's a very important thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's it's really just, that's your happy place. That's the place that, you can thrive the best. And so think about that. When you hear all these numbers online and in podcasts and in interviews and all that stuff, really think about what it is that you want out of this business. And sometimes you have to actually take action in order to learn that. But just because what you want is different than somebody else, that doesn't make it wrong. That just makes it right for you. So that's been a big takeaway that I've had over this past year. And lastly, and the last one that I'll leave you with is this. Really understand the types of projects that you're taking on, because that is a big, big thing. For us, we took on a lot of projects without probably as much thought as we should have over the years in terms of capital obligations, time, having to fight with the city and neighborhood associations in order to get these projects to fruition. And so they could be partitions, they could be, all kinds of different things. But when you get into the development game where you're basically tearing down a house and you're trying to put more than one in its place, or you're dealing with, slide zones, or you're dealing with high dollar projects, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. And, you really need to understand what it's going to take to get those projects to the finish line before you jump. And so I'm more of a fire ready aim kind of guy. And I'm starting to, recognize that more. And as I move forward, I'm just much more aware of the types of projects that we're taking on and ultimately what that means for our pipeline in the future in terms of being able to exit those projects, get them to market, sell them, realize our profits, and move on to the next one so that we're not caught up in dealing with just all kinds of mind-numbing brain damage that can come from projects that you just don't think enough about on the front end in terms of what is it going to take to get that to the finish line. So really understand the types of projects that you're taking on. And, if you understand it and you know what you're getting into and you're willing to do that, then that's all good. But, make sure that you think about that before you take on projects. That's probably been my biggest takeaway for the year and really for the last couple of years. But it's resonated the most with me this year because we're finally starting to get to the finish line on 3 projects actually that have been a big giant pain in my ass, to be honest with you. And now that we're getting close to the finish line, I'm reflecting on, is it going to be worth it in the end? Yeah, we'll make some money, but should we have probably passed? And, the value of that money and time and energy elsewhere probably would have been better spent. So take that for what it's worth, but I think that's some valuable information. So those are kind of my biggest takeaways, reflections of this year. Hopefully you guys got some value from it. I've got another great interview coming up next week that I know you guys are going to dig, but I want to go through some reflecting this year and really talk about some stuff that's meaningful and that hopefully resonates with a lot of you guys out there listening. So that wraps up episode 245. I'll see you all next week.
Rolling, go to cedar, stash in a dash, hold 2 heaters, block eye, put holes through beaters. Ghetto fast, throw through cheaters, ballin'. Brooklyn Dawn, addicted to Chris, hooked on Dawn. 50 G's, hooked a song. Ma, I wanna see how you lookin' thongs. Hustlin', guys are simpos, cause I chop rocks the size of Mentos. Blame me, I tried to hen hoes. Look at the hurt, your eyes are swing closed. Pimpin', here's a new way to flirt. Now listen to the 2-way alert, it goes. Let's go, VIP, boo, raise your skirt. Holla back, youngin'. Holla back. 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 I'm gangsta. Y'all just wanna be federal agents on the piece. 30 a gram, 28 on the keys. Got a good lawyer, I'm gonna squeeze. Thuggin', jeans and Timbs, fitted to the front, lean the brim. Ride, but never on teenage rims. And I keep a chick face between my limbs. Styling, y'all heard about my kick game. I'm on the parquet, you see me at the Knick game. Probably seen this tatted on your chick frame. FABOLOUS. Riding, y'all know as well I do. That's the way you can tell I'm blue. So I got a deal, I sell pot too. Cause before I hit the pins, I'm getting bailed by crew. Holla back, youngin'. Holla back. Holla back, youngin'. Holla back. Holla back, youngin'. Holla back.